Hey everyone, Mr. Mase here. This is a guide for round 10 of the FIA Nations Cup taking place at Nurburgring GP with select Group 3 cars. Let's get this started. As you're about to start your lap when it comes to time trial or qualifying, start off by going a bit wide into this final turn. That way you can go for a late apex and get a faster start to your new lap, whether this is for time trial or qualifying. Brake balance is at +1 and we're on the racing medium tires. Your first braking point just before the tarmac on the left ends. Brake hard for a while and you want to go for the apex as there's a little dip that helps the car rotate a bit faster. Carefully get on the throttle and then ease off the throttle for this next turn and then bring yourself towards the right, and your next braking point is before the green area on the right ends. Brake hard for a short moment, then ease off of the brakes, bringing yourself all the way to the inside of the turn as much as you can, and then you want to carefully get on the throttle, lift off of the throttle for this right turn, taking advantage of the red and white curbs. You can also go a bit wide through this part, but don't go too wide, otherwise you do risk getting an off-track penalty. Then brake just as the track piece on the right ends. Quick burst of braking, and you want to bring yourself towards the left side of the track and brake when the curb on the left ends. Just focus on easing off of the brakes as soon as you can to let the car rotate and then get on the throttle as soon as you can. Bring yourself towards the left. When the curb on the left starts, that is where you start to brake. Brake hard for a short while. Take your time turning in, easing off of the brakes. Carefully get on the throttle so you don't generate any wheel spin. For the S's, you want to do a little lift off of the throttle, kind of just playing around with the throttle to try to get the car to rotate while maintaining a high speed. Bring yourself towards the right and then brake just as the dark tarmac on the right starts. So you'll brake right around here, brake hard for a short while, slowly ease off of the brakes, and then do a little bit of braking control. You just want to fine tune the car to rotate around this turn and set yourself up for a fast exit. Take your time, bring yourself towards the right side of the track, look for the 100-meter board and brake before you pass it. Brake hard for a short while and take advantage of the red and white curbs at the chicane. You also want to do a little bit of throttle control to try to maintain stability on the car. Try to take advantage of the curves once again. Be careful on the throttle so you don't spin out. Finally, brake just as the dry grass on the left starts. Brake hard for a short moment and slowly ease off of the brakes as you turn in, trying to somewhat go for a late apex. But that is pretty much it for the lap guide. Let's go ahead and take a look at the strategies. For the qualifying session, you only have 5 minutes to try to get a good qualifying time, which means that you'll have 2 chances to try to get the best qualifying time possible. You want to be a little careful on your outlap since the tire is pretty high. It is a times 7 and your racing medium tires, they don't last that long. So you want to be a little easy on them on your outlaps so you don't get too much tire wear before you even start your first qualifying lap. Slipstream can be kind of useful here. I personally am going to say just qualify by yourself, especially with how difficult this track is. Also, be careful when you go through this chicane. You want to make sure that you nail it down. So if there's one part of the track that you want to really focus down on, it is that chicane, as there is a lot of time that can be gained there. But if you get that chicane wrong, you can lose a lot of time. So make sure you get that nailed down. Consistently nail it down so you don't pick up any penalties or lose any time. And because of the high tire wear rate, I would highly suggest trying to get your best qualifying time done on the first qualifying lap. But in case if you mess up really bad for some reason, then at least you'll have another chance to try to get that qualifying time down. So really you want to make sure that you're able to nail every single turn out of this track, especially the final chicane, as that chicane itself, once again, there is a lot of time that can be gained just by nailing that chicane down. And for those wondering about the brake balance I had for the Porsche in the qualifying, I had it at +1 just so I can get a bit more rotation since this car is a bit understeered for some reason. I also had it at +1, so 1 to the rear for the time trial and in the race. And yeah, 2 chances to try to get a good qualifying time, so make sure that those chances count. But anyways, moving over to the race strategy. So we're doing 14 laps at Nurburgring GP with select Group 3 cars. The cars being the Volkswagen Beetle Group 3, the Audi R8 LMS, the BMW M6 M Power, the Mercedes-AMG GT3, and finally the Porsche 911 RSR. So you can only use these 5 vehicles for this race. And a quick note about the M6, it has to be the M6 M Power, not the walking horse one. If you try entering the race with the walking horse one, you're not going to be able to enter. Use the M Power for this race. But anyways, moving on over to the race details. So 14 laps, Nurburgring GP, select Group 3 cars. The tire wear is a ×7, so tire wear is an issue. You have both the racing medium and hard tires available for this race, and they're both required, so you do need to use both tire compounds so you don't get a 1-minute penalty after the race ends. Fuel is a ×3, which means that for most of these cars, fuel is barely not an issue. The most that you need to do in order to quote-unquote fuel save is to not over rev the car. So you can let the bar blink on the bottom of the screen, just don't let it blink too much, and that's kind of it. Don't rev it out at the start of the race, so when you're going through the grid walk, don't rev it there. Don't over rev the car in the middle of the race, and you're pretty much good to go, except for the Volkswagen Beetle. That one, you actually have to do a bit of short shifting to be able to make it the whole race without having to refuel. And I'll talk a bit more about that when we get to each individual car. But also, I know I've repeated this many times, make sure you're consistently able to nail down this chicane, because if you get too aggressive or you make a silly mistake, it can be very easy to end up completely binning it like how I did. I pretty much just made myself look stupid in front of all those people. So don't be like me, don't bin it at the chicane. But anyways, so the tire wear is pretty high. It is a ×7, especially on the racing medium tires. So you do feel the tire wear kick in as early as a 4. So you do want to be careful about how you're driving your car. Nice and easy on your driving style, nice and easy on the turn-in, braking, and throttle input. So you'll be pitting in halfway into the race. So after 7 laps, switch on over from the racing medium to the racing hard tires. And because I haven't been over revving the car, I don't need to refuel. I actually have just a tad bit of extra fuel remaining. But anyways, your pit loss is going to be around 21.4 seconds, so do be aware of that. And yeah, we're just going in for a tire change, no refuel, switching on over to the racing hard tires to fulfill both tire requirements. I highly don't suggest going 8 laps on the racing medium tires because you will start to regret it right away. The tire wear is pretty brutal here, and even though it might not show that much tire wear, your tires will suffer and the car will be even sketchier to drive. And that is going to be the case with all cars. The cars do get a bit sketchy to drive once the medium tires start to wear out. So as you're getting closer to lap 7 in your stint, you just want to be a little more careful about how you're driving the car. And we'll skip on over towards the end of the race. So fuel is actually really close. We're at 2% of fuel remaining, and we haven't been over revving it too much. So we should have just enough fuel to be able to finish the race. Tire wear, it has been slowly been kicking in, but it is not too much of an issue. And we're actually going to finish the race with just 1% of fuel left. So once again, the fuel situation, it is a bit close, but as long as you're not over revving the car, you should be good to go. Unless if you're in the Beetle, you do need to do a bit of short shifting. And let's go ahead and take a look at all 5 cars. So I did test all 5 cars to see how each car performed for this race. So I'm doing an order of worst car first, which is the Audi R8 LMS, to the best car, which we'll find out later. So, the Audi RA LMS. This is a terrible car. The pace is just not there. I was able to get a 155.9 for its fastest lap time, which is not that fast compared to the other cars. This car is pretty unstable. It wants to kill you at every single turn. The rear tires wear out pretty fast. Even with the front brake bias, it's still going to wear out pretty fast. So you're eventually going to end up getting spun out by the car. You can see me just struggling to keep the car under control. And yeah, this car, it's pure misery. I highly don't suggest driving this car, and if you do end up choosing this car, good luck. You're going to need it. So for the fastest lap time, I was able to get a 155.970, and as for total time, I couldn't get one because I kept on spinning out. This car is a miserable piece of shit. Anyways, so the next car up is the BMW M6 GT3 M-Power. Keyword M-Power. It cannot be the walking horse version. If you try to use the walking horse version, the game is not going to let you choose it for the race. So for the brake balance, I had it at -1, although you can use 0 or +1, which is 1 to the rear. But the thing with the M6 is that the rear tires do wear out a bit fast, and that is because it generates quite a bit of wheel spin. So this car is actually not that understeery, which caught me by surprise. I was able to get it around the corners kind of easily, maybe a little too easily because of that oversteeriness. So you do want to be very careful about how much throttle you're applying as you're coming out of the turns, because it's very easy to generate some wheel spin, which can be enough to either get a bit more tire wear towards the rear tires, or worse yet, spin out. And it will become an issue once the tire really starts to kick in towards the end of your stint. But if you're able to get that part controlled, this car is a pretty decent car to drive. It does have a bit of power, a bit of handling, so it's not too bad of a car to use if you're able to get the tire wear and the oversteeriness factor controlled. But the thing is that there are other cars from these group of cars that we're using that do the job better than the M6. So this car, you might see some people use it, but it's not going to be as dominant as some of the other cars that we haven't talked about yet. In terms of feel, as long as you don't over rev it too much, you should be fine on feel. And in terms of tire wear, the rear tires wear out a bit faster, once again because it does have a bit of the easy tendency to get some wheel spin, so you do want to be careful about how much throttle input you're putting in as you're coming out of the turns. But anyways, for the M6 GT3 M-Power, I was able to get a 27 minutes and 34 seconds for total time, 1 minute and 55.584 seconds for its fastest lap time. And that will make it the 4th fastest car out of this list, the 3rd fastest car being the Mercedes-AMG GT3. So this car is kind of similar to the M6 GT3, except this car is not as oversteery as the M6. This car is rather the complete opposite. It's pretty understeery, so you do want to bring the brake balance towards the rear of the car, and in my case I had it at +1 or 1 to the rear, and I think that's going to be the most that you'll want to do it, because it's going to have the same tire wear issues as the M6, especially if you bring the brake balance towards the back. So this does create a bit of a weird situation, because you need the brake balance at +1 to get this boat to go around the turns, but because of that, the tire wear will be increased on the rear tires, which does mean that the car will become a bit sketchy to drive towards the end of your stint. So if you do decide to use +1 brake balance, you do want to be careful about how you're driving the car, and once again, be careful about how much throttle input you're applying as you're coming out of those turns. And this car, it's a bit more of a power car because it doesn't have the handling. Once again, it's pretty understeery. You're pretty much driving a ship at this point. And once the tire wear starts to kick in, you want to be careful about how you're driving the car, as once again it does get pretty sketchy as you're coming out of those turns. In terms of feel is not an issue as long as you don't over rev it too much. So just like the other cars that we've covered, as long as you're not revving out the car way too much, then you should be fine. And that's kind of it for this car. Not too much to say. Pretty similar to the M6, except it's a lot more understeery, a bit more power focused. So the Mercedes-AMG GT3 was the third best car I tested, also getting in 27 minutes and 34 seconds, which is the same time I got with the M6, except the AMG got a better fastest lap time of a 1 minute and 55.343. And once again, it's a good car, but there are other cars that do it better. But anyways, moving on to second place, and it's the Porsche 911 RSR. So this car was able to get a 27 minutes and 32 seconds with its fastest lap time of a 155.442 seconds. In terms of brake balance, there are a couple of choices. If you need a bit more rotation because this car is actually a bit understeery, go +1 or 1 to the rear. But if the rear tires are wearing out too fast for you, then you can either keep it at 0 or move it up to -1 or 1 to the front. Just be aware that if you do have it at -1, the front tires will now wear out a bit faster, which can make the car even more understeery towards the end of your stint. And this is just for the racing medium tires. Once you switch on over to the racing hard tires, I would suggest moving the brake balance to either 0 or +1. In terms of tire wear, the Porsche overall, it's pretty good on the tires. So this car, it's not going to be too sketchy towards the end of the stint. You may have a couple of moments, but the car will still remain very controllable. And in terms of feel, once again, don't over rev it and you should be good to go. So once you're able to get a good feel for the car, especially if you move the brake balance a bit towards the back, this car does navigate through Nurburgring GP pretty well. Nurburgring GP is a handling track, the Porsche 911 RSR is a handling car, so they have some pretty good synergy right there. And one of the best things about the Porsche is that it is really easy to drive this car. It's one of the easiest Group 3 cars to drive in the entire game, so having this car here is definitely a good choice for those who are not too comfortable with Group 3 cars but still want to give this race a go. So if you're looking for a car that is pretty easy to drive and that is still pretty competitive, then the Porsche 911 RSR is the car for you. And that was the main reason why I chose the Porsche for the lap guide. This car, once again, pretty easy to drive, it's pretty forgiving, and it's a handling track, so the first car I thought about for this track was the Porsche 911 RSR. So overall, very good car, it's a great handling car, and it's an easy car to drive. So as I mentioned earlier, I was able to get a 27 minutes and 32 seconds for total time. And for the fastest lap time, I was able to get a 1 minute and 55.442 seconds. So the Porsche 911 RSR, it is the safest choice that is still pretty competitive in this combination. But the best car for this combination is the Volkswagen Beetle Group 3. So this is a bit more of a power car, kind of the complete opposite of the Porsche 911 RSR. This car does pack a punch when it comes to the power. It is a bit understeery and a bit weird to drive though, so it is going to make it a bit difficult to try to get the best pace out of it, and which makes me kind of upset because I got a 155.21 run, but I binned it. But anyways, yeah, this car, if you're able to get a good feel of how to make the most out of this car, then this car is going to be a really good car for you to use. But if you're not too used to this car, if you're feeling really uncomfortable driving the Beetle, then you might be better off with the Porsche 911 RSR. Once again, it feels pretty difficult to get the maximum or to get the most out of this car. I had the brake balance at 0, and you can leave it there for both the racing, medium, and hard stints, but you can also move it to +1 or 1 to the rear if you need the car to rotate a little bit more. This car is also the only car in the lot that needs to short shift so it doesn't have to refuel or face any risk of running out of fuel. So if you're using an automatic transmission, then this car is not going to be it for you because you will be forced to refuel. So where to shift with the Beetle, you pretty much want to shift just after the gear number where the red box kind of hangs out at, or where the transparent box is when that red box is not there. You're pretty much shifting right there, and by shifting there you should be able to have just enough fuel to be able to complete the race. And once again, this is for all cars. You want to make sure that you're using 7% of fuel per lap, so you'll have just enough fuel to be able to finish the race. And yeah, the Volkswagen Beetle, it is pretty much a power car, which is kind of weird because in a handling track like the Nurburgring GP, you think that it wouldn't necessarily work, but in this scenario it actually kind of does work. So the Beetle, it is a very good car to use, but it is hard to get the most out of it. So the Volkswagen Beetle is looking like it'll be the best choice for this race, but because it is not the easiest car to use, there is going to be an alternative, the alternative being the Porsche 911 RSR. So if you're looking for a car that's a little easier to use, then go with the Porsche. But if you're able to get a good feel about how to drive the Beetle, then go with the Beetle. In terms of total time, I was able to get a 27 minutes and 31 seconds with the Volkswagen Beetle, making it the fastest car out of the 5 cars I tested for this video. And the fastest lap time I got with this car was a 1 minute and 55.414 seconds. But before I go, let's go ahead and take a look at places to overtake and the penalty serving zone. So the main straight is obviously one of the best places to get the overtake done. You want to try to set yourself up to get a really fast exit so you can take advantage of the slipstream and try to catch up, or even just go side by side with your opponent. After that, it's pretty much going to be a single file line for a while. It's going to be really difficult to try to make a move on anyone unless if they really mess up a turn. And in a bit, the penalty serving zone will be coming up, and it is the only penalty serving zone that is on Nurburgring GP. It is hanging out on this smaller back straight, so halfway into it will be the penalty serving zone, which is right here. So if you have any penalties to serve, you'll be serving it there, which actually makes this part a possible place to get an overtake done. After that, it is single file line once again, and I'm just going to skip on over towards the back straight, and this part is the last best place to get an overtake done. You could definitely try to make use of the slipstream and hopefully bring yourself side to side, go for the inside line, and hopefully make the opponent back out before you guys go through the chicane. And this final part can actually be a place to get the overtake done, but it is very situational. If your opponent's got a really bad exit out of the chicane, then you can definitely take advantage of them. But anyways, that is pretty much it for this guide. Hopefully this guide helps you out, and if it does, you can press the like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I do have a membership program thing, which you can check out in the description down below. But other than that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. So this is Mr. CA wishing you a good race, and I'll see you in the next video.